How's it going, everyone? And welcome to the Eminence Legacy Podcast. My name is Alfonso Cadena, and I'm joined here today with my co-host.
Jose Luis Cadena, and thank you for joining us.
Awesome. So, Jose Luis, when was the last time you were on an airplane?
It's probably been 6 months.
6 months?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy when you think about it that there was a time when airplanes didn't exist. So it comes to the question, how did somebody come up with the idea to build something that doesn't exist? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll
So
take
that is
somebody pretty out. It'll take somebody pretty out there to do something crazy like that.
Yeah, so what I was recently reading a letter from the Wright brothers that they had written to the Smithsonian. And, one of the things that was really interesting about these guys is that when you read their letter, you can see like their power of observation, the way that they would observe their surroundings and see, um, that something was possible. I mean, you look at birds, you look at insects, and a lot of them have the ability to fly. So what's stopping us from doing it? So what we can pick up out of the story is that a vision is not something that you have to see. It's something that you need to be able to imagine, giving yourself that creativity, the ability to see something that has not yet come to pass. Would you agree?
Actually, I do agree. And one thing that I was reading about when it talks about vision, I heard a story and I about a person that had been hidden in the head with a bat accidentally, and they couldn't they when they went to get checked, um they put an item in front of him, and his eyes were following the item. The only problem with that he did have the sight, but the part of the vision, which is in the brain part, it wasn't actually, um I guess, translating what he was seeing. So it's crazy that we could have a lot of times the sight, but if the vision is not there, it's going to be hard to, I guess, capture it.
Absolutely, that's interesting. I had read about a condition similar to that. But yeah, it's definitely two different processes. So as I was reading this letter from the Wright brothers that they wrote to the Smithsonian, requesting some resources that the Smithsonian had during the time about what had been studied about flight. So it hadn't been something that was created yet. It was only something discussed in theory. So a little bit about the Wright brothers. So it was two brothers. It was Orville and Wilbur, and they were captivated from a young age about the concept of flying. As a matter of fact, one of their favorite toys was something that was shaped like a helicopter, which again was only the shape of it, but like the mechanism, sort of the functionality of it didn't exist yet, but it did capture their imagination. And these two guys have always been really ambitious. So, what's cool about them too is that being brothers, they actually went into business together, and they started by making their own custom made bikes, which is actually pretty neat, because you wonder how much of I've gone bike riding today. I'm nowhere near like the cyclists that like customize their bikes and stuff like that. But you wonder how much of the ideas about the modern bikes that we have today came from this period of time, particularly from these two, because we attribute flight to them, but I hadn't really considered, if they had any contribution towards towards cycling or our concept of the modern bike. So during this time, they gained the necessary knowledge about how mechanisms works, about different mechanics, and this was something that they were going to use later on for their success, which I think is a really good, insight about how things work, right? So everything happens for a reason. So maybe just because you're not using a skill right now, or maybe you're learning a skill, but you don't see like how it could be useful in the future. It might not make sense right away, but maybe sometimes you're going to realize that things from your past are actually preparing you for something in the future. So the brothers had always had in the back of the mind that they're going to have the ability to make something that could not just fly, but something that can fly and carry both of them, right? They wanted
Okay.
to make like we're going to make an aircraft, but we're both going to get on it and we're both going to be off the ground. So like
Okay.
that what's really cool about that is, I mean, that's the vision, right? Like nothing like it
Yeah.
exists, right? And it's like what's neat about it too is that again with this vision, it's not just about like a concept of of abstractness. I mean, they were like really specific. It's like, okay, it has to be some sort of craft that carries at least two people because we worked on this together. We're gonna be working on this together, and that's what they started on, like in like near North Carolina. Uh, so their one of their breakthroughs was once when Wilbur Wright had become interested in the possibility of human flight, So Wilbur wrote a letter to the Smithsonian Institution to obtain papers and a list of publications on aerodynamics research. At the time of this letter, Wilbur Wright was 32 years old and his brother was 28. Again, another interesting part about their life, sometimes I know that as we get older, we're known to being less of risk takers, but sometimes your career can take a whole complete different turn at a later point in your life and can lead you to places that you didn't expect to. And once
Yeah,
again, like past experiences, playing a big part of this, that you find that the skills that you've been working on all of a sudden have an application for something you have a passion for. So in July of the same year, just shortly after this letter, and perhaps after receiving the requested information back, Wilbur put the wing warping to the test for the first time, testing for much more lift could be gathered when the wings were warped, twisted on a biplane kite with wingspan of 5 feet. So I mean, they were experimenting with the different parts of it. And now, when you read their letter,
yeah,
what's really interesting about it is that, like I said, I mean, these guys were super observant and were looking into how this was already possible in nature and how, like, if it already exists, then there should be a way to replicate it and apply it for human flight. So I'm gonna go ahead and read some of the letters because I find it really interesting. So he writes to the Smithsonian and he says, I have been interested in the problem of of mechanical and human flight ever since I was a boy. I considered a number of bats of various sizes after the style of Cayley's and Penuy's S2 machine. Now, what's interesting about that Cayman and Pinuit are some of the engineers that were first toying with the idea. So Cayley was an English engineer in 1799 who's credited for having conceived the concept of the modern aeroplane, a flying machine that could have fixed wings and separate systems for lift, propulsion, and control. Now, the other guy that he also mentions is Penude, who was a 19th century French pioneer. This guy also did a lot to in regards to research for flight, but his dream never came true because at the time he couldn't secure funding. So he ended up taking his own life because he couldn't secure funding.
yeah.
So I mean, you wonder, like, I mean, if he would have surrounded himself around the right good of people, if he could have been able to convey the vision that he had, how much more he could have done, instead of had like a tragic ending to it. Granted, I mean, there probably were other issues, but as far as we know from the story, his biggest vision was shut down because other people didn't believe in what he had. Um, but now you move forward to the future and you look at the Wright brothers and how far they've gotten. Now they're building upon what other people had imagined, and they create a vision on their own, thinking, you know what, we can still take this further. There's still a lot more to be learned here. So the next part of this letter is actually pretty interesting. So it says, my observations have only convinced me more firmly that human flight is possible and practical. It is only a question of knowledge and skill, just as in all acrobatic feats. Birds are the most perfectly trained gymnasts in the world and are especially well fitted for their work. And it may be that man will never equal them, but no one who has watched a bird chasing an insect or another bird can doubt that its feats are performed which require 3 or 4 times the effort required in ordinary flight. I believe so. Again, I mean, there's that foundational part of these guys' vision, right? That they believe something can become. So I believe that that simple flight at least is possible to man, and that the experiments and investigations of a large number of independent workers will result in the accumulation of information and knowledge and skill, which will finally lead to the accomplished flight. So so I mean, I don't know, man. It's like really inspiring to see, like, when you look at these guys from the past, how they, they have this vision, they're able to convey it, and they're able to put it into action,
Well, when you were talking about I forgot the name, the one that took his life. What was his
right?
name?
So his name was it's French, Pinud or Pinard,
Okay, so
Alphonse Pinard.
okay, let's talk about Alphonse. So this is where I think about sight. Sight absorbs the visual elements of the world, but then the vision part unveils a world that can exist. And sight is always gonna reveal the boundaries in our path. Vision sees beyond those boundaries. And I think that a lot of times, like when, if he would have, like you said, surrounded himself with the right people, maybe his mindset would have changed. But when you go back to the Wright brothers that were, I guess maybe they were feeding off each other's energy, and that allowed them to keep focused on the end goal, that vision that they had to be able to create something that they didn't see.
Right. Yeah, no, they did. There definitely was a chemistry there. I mean, for you to be able to go into business with a, with a family member, in this case, like, I mean, it was two brothers that own a bike shop, and they were already like toying like with like, okay, how could we make this bike better? And that's a big part to creating a vision. What in the world do you see that can be corrected? What do you see that can be improved? Like I know a lot of people, like the streaming wars has gotten out of control. But if you look at the original like history of companies, for example, like Netflix, the reason that they exist is because they were trying to solve a problem. Like let's say like the issue of late fees. Um,
Yeah.
so what can you find in the world that you want to perfect, that you want to improve upon?
And I think this is with everything that we do in life, that we need to have that vision. Yes, we want to have the sight to be able to identify what we're seeing, what we're missing, or the boundaries, but we need to cast that vision to be able to overcome those things that are before us. I mean, imagine if, because I think that Wright brothers were working on that while there was somebody else working at the same time, but I think they weren't able to get it off the ground. But my point is that I guess when you build that vision and you work with that passion and you're consistent, I think you get closer and closer to I guess manifesting that vision.
Right. Yeah. So here's some things that like we can also keep in mind, while we're on the topics. Remember to ask yourself why you want certain things, right? So like, I mean, it could, even if it is like, I mean, like you mentioned, like a passion, but it helps always remembering the why it is that we're working on, and when it's something that is for, for ourselves, for the betterment, for the improvement of ourselves, like it's always going to be a better result. And you always see that that's as one of the things that I'm sure you've had this experience as a coach, right? That like in order for somebody to be able to get fit, they need to have the reason why. Is it because it can't just be something like short term, like, oh, because I want to lose weight, because then you'll very easily be discouraged. It has to be more foundational than that. It's because I still want to play with my kids when I get older. It's because I still want the ability to be independent and move myself around and being able to go on long walks. Like those are the reasons why we do what we do. So that's something we definitely want to keep in mind. Why is it that that you're cultivating that vision, and always keep that in mind. Think about it, what you want and not only what you don't want. I mean, and that's important, particularly because we get so distracted all the time, just complaining and being unhappy about our current situation. It's like, okay, well, it's very easy to point out, what's wrong in the world, because there's always going to be something to point at. But what is it that you want instead? What is your standard for how it is that you want to get it done?
And I think that's the important part, that we need to set those standards and those different, I guess, stones to be able to continue to move in the right direction.
Yep, definitely. Also, giving yourself the permission to dream, like I mean, imagine, I mean, when you read stories like this, right? In this case, we're talking about the Wright brothers. When you put yourself in the historical context of like of where they existed, how do and we talked earlier about the ability to convey a vision, but imagine explaining to someone for one day, it's like, oh yeah, pretty soon we're gonna have the ability to fly, to lift ourselves off the ground and go great distances. What would have the average person have responded to that? Right? Probably like with some ridicule, thinking it's like, man, you're crazy. Like none of that. Like men have men have feet because we're made to walk, and we're going to be walking for the rest of our lives. So you needed someone to be able to cast that vision onto others.
And like vision is a bridge that connects us, or like your present to your future. That's something that we need to remember, that it's something that's going to connect the present to the future. So by doing this, we're allowing ourselves to build a better future for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Being creative, like is going to be a big part of this, and this is like, I think this has become really challenging, because there was a time when it's like you just had to be like the best craftsman in your village. Now it's like, I mean, you're competing against the whole world because the internet has brought us a lot more closer together. So it's easy to fall into the position. It's like, well, I mean, what can possibly be done that hasn't already been done? And maybe that's just not the question. Maybe the question is like, I mean, how can you stand out from the rest? Because in reality, it's like, when you set yourself apart and committing yourself to a standard of your liking, being able to set what what you expect, it is what's going to set you apart ultimately. So that's something that we have to give ourselves the ability, the freedom to be creative, not narrow ourselves to just the conventional or what we see every day, or being like a defeatist by looking at the people around us and saying it's like, like nobody else seems to be supporting me, or everybody else seems to think that this is a ridiculous idea. Well, at that point, it's like where you need to be able to stand up for yourself and say, you know what? No, I am allowed to think differently.
This reminds me of a part in scripture where it says that without vision, people will perish. Thinking differently is a cornerstone of innovation. It means seeing the possibilities where others see limitations, embracing that curiosity, and challenging the status quo. When we are challenging ourselves, putting ourselves in a place and space for us to be able to push past those limits. When we allow ourselves to dream, we unlock the power of imagination and set the stage for extraordinary achievements. We need to move on and stop being average. We're not even good. We need to be better. We need to work on ourselves being the best. Having a vision is about believing in a future that others may not see, and being relentless, pursuing the passion and determination. Dare to dream, dare to think differently, and envision a reality where your aspirations become your legacy. And this is what the Wright brothers did. In the mindset, we transform not only our lives, but also the world around us. And if we give up on our own dreams, other people are not going to be able to receive the blessing, because when you give up your own dreams, those aspirations, when you don't cast that vision for other people, there's going to be a lot of people that are lost in the process because they need somebody to be able to lead them. So we encourage you all to cast that vision and remember that vision is what takes you from your current present to your future.
All right, everyone. So that concludes this week's episode. If you would like more coaching, or when it comes to a life coach or personal training, you can go to www.eminencelegacylive.com so you can check out our website. Have a good week, everyone. Bye bye.
Until next time, and thank you for joining us. And don't forget to rise to your eminence.